Imagine the bustling streets of Rome. Merchants shout to sell their goods, senators in flowing togas discuss politics, and former slaves, now freedmen, walk among them. These individuals are navigating a society that granted them freedom, but held on to a stigma that never fully allowed them to forget their past. This is the story of Roman freedmen, or liberti, men and women who managed to leave behind the chains of slavery, yet faced a lifetime of complex restrictions, expectations, and challenges. Today, we'll delve into the unique and often difficult position of freedmen in ancient Rome, exploring their legal status, the process of gaining freedom, the limitations they faced, and the ways they carved out paths of influence and respect in Roman society. In Roman society, freedmen were former slaves who had been manumitted, that is, legally freed from servitude. Known as liberti or libertini in Latin, they occupied a unique place, positioned between the freeborn citizens of Rome and those who remained enslaved. Manumission granted them certain legal rights, yet freedom for these individuals was never absolute. Male freedmen could become Roman citizens and gain rights to vote. However, this freedom came with boundaries. They couldn't run for political office, nor could they join the prestigious senatorial class. It was a freedom granted with reservations, and it reflected Rome's deeply ingrained social hierarchies. So, how did slaves become freedmen in ancient Rome? The process of manumission could take several forms. The first, manumissio vindicta, was a formal ceremony before a magistrate, often a public affair symbolizing the transfer from slavery to freedom. Then, there was manumissio censu, where a slave was registered as a freedman in the Roman census, a symbolic inclusion into the state. And lastly, manumissio testamento, where a master would grant freedom through their will, a final act ensuring the slave's future independence. While some masters freed slaves to reward loyalty, others used it as a strategic tool, hoping to motivate other slaves to work diligently in the hope of eventual freedom. However, even after being freed, many were still bound by obligations to their former masters. Freedmen had to show continued respect, or obsequium, often involving financial support or several days of work each year for their former master's household. Even after manumission, freedmen carried what the Romans called the macula servitutis, or the stain of slavery. This wasn't merely a metaphor, but a social label that former slaves could never entirely escape. They faced prejudice and discrimination, particularly from Rome's elite, who believed that servitude had left a lasting moral taint. Freedmen were often stereotyped in Roman literature as deceitful or subservient, a narrative that only reinforced the barriers they faced. Legally, freedmen were barred from higher political office, as their social origins were seen as incompatible with Rome's ideals of leadership. Additionally, they couldn't marry into the upper echelons of society. This restriction extended beyond freedmen themselves to their descendants, who were often marked by their ancestors' former servitude. Freedwomen, or female freed slaves, faced their own limitations. While they were protected from being forced into prostitution, their rights were generally limited, with few pathways for social mobility. However, some freed women found ways to gain recognition, particularly in religious roles or as patrons of temples, where they contributed to public life in a more indirect way. Despite these challenges, many freedmen defied expectations, achieving success through business, trade, and public contributions. While they couldn't hold political office, they often wielded influence through their free-born children, who, by virtue of their birth, could rise in status. In Roman colonies, where social dynamics were somewhat more flexible, freedmen could sometimes impact local politics through their family connections, shaping their community from behind the scenes. Wealthy freedmen often donated to their communities, funding public works or donating to municipal treasuries. Some left substantial sums in their wills for causes that would benefit the public, a way of enhancing their own legacy while reinforcing their status within the community. By building or restoring roads or by funding temples, freedmen contributed visibly to Roman society and often won respect from their communities despite lingering prejudice. For freedmen with unique skills, there were opportunities to make a name for themselves. Educated slaves, upon manumission, could become respected teachers, writers, or administrators. Wealthy freedmen also joined religious or social organizations like the Sodales Augustales, which allowed them to participate in public life and engage with Roman traditions, further embedding themselves within society. Under the Roman emperors, especially during the rule of Claudius, certain freedmen rose to incredible heights of influence. Known as the Familia Caesaris, the emperor's household, these freedmen worked closely with the emperor and wielded substantial power. One notable example was Marcus Antonius Pallas, who served under Emperor Claudius. Originally a Greek slave, Pallas managed to become one of the wealthiest and most influential men in Rome. Acting as a secretary of the treasury, he advised Claudius and was instrumental in supporting Agrippina the Younger's ambitions. Other powerful freedmen like Narcissus and Callistus similarly became close advisors, often acting as intermediaries between the emperor and Rome's political elite. Though these freedmen had no official political standing, their proximity to the emperor gave them significant, albeit controversial, influence. Yet, for every success story, many freedmen remained marginalized, facing social stigma that even wealth and influence could not fully erase. Their stain of slavery persisted, affecting not only their own lives, but also those of their children and grandchildren. Roman society remained hierarchical, and the freeborn elite never let freedmen forget their origins. In the eyes of many, a former slave, regardless of wealth or success, was forever marked by their past servitude. But freedmen found ways to navigate these limitations. They built legacies in their children, celebrated their hard-won freedom in inscriptions, and participated in community life. They honored their citizenship and adopted Roman values, and by doing so, they continually negotiated their identity within Rome's rigid social structure. Freedmen in ancient Rome were proof of Rome's complex social fabric. Though they were bound by legal limitations and the stain of their origins, many freedmen managed to thrive. They contributed to Rome's economy, engaged in public works, and even influenced imperial administration. Their lives and legacies remind us of a society that, despite its rigid hierarchy, offered avenues, however narrow, for change, resilience, and agency. In the end, freedmen's stories are a testament to the paradox of Roman freedom, where citizenship was granted, yet full acceptance was withheld. Thank you for joining us on this exploration of the lives of Roman freedmen. If you enjoyed this journey, make sure to like and subscribe for more deep dives into the fascinating stories of the ancient world. Let us know in the comments, what aspect of Roman society should we explore next?